While I'll take care of some technical stuff, I'm gonna pass the mic to this car's owner, David. Have him give us a quick rundown on what we're looking at. It's coming in here already with a pretty good start on the tune to it. David was a student in one of our previous classes, and we're just gonna see what this thing will do on the dyno. I'm gonna pass the mic and get all technical stuff taken care of.
Hey everyone, it's a 95 Mustang with a Sabaza, automatic PCM, but with a TKO 600 transmission. It's a stock short block 302. It's got cane field heads, cane field intake with a 90mm throttle body, SET Big Air 5000 mass air slot style, GT45 turbo, 2-inch up pipe, 3.5-inch down pipe. 327 gears. I've run 13 pounds through it so far. Went 12.3 at 123.5 at the track, and looking to see how much more we can get out of it today. Whee!
Thank you.
It's not as loud as one would expect. Like, whenever that wastegate opens, I wish you had more listeners. Yeah, I have one thing that's one time. That dirt bike power band, he brings so much movement on the block. You know, that 2.3 watts. So they one thing to 50 minutes of the start cheap and you have all kinds of moves on the day. They just keep making more about it. You know, now that you convert over the mass air, the codes are all keeping that in the back there. Slider valve. Clean air heat. Yeah. Slider valve. So. I remember that grandfather of Matt. Malcolm Yada's the first one kind of, and yeah, the door opens. Wow. It's a thermostat mass air. Yeah, it really is. And the bad thing about them is you know, when you start to make it more higher, they just open. Yeah, it just opens all the way, and it doesn't. It's like when you max out a map. Right, exactly. That's what it's like. And now that you guys figured out how to run them over the mass air, that's restriction in itself right there. You know, it's the whole time. Yeah, you can get turbos for right now. Better turbos. And you got to find a You're trying to get into, you know, get into third gear where you pop in. I ran last time NA. want to get power steering, AC, and the AC.
Luckily, they were made to fit A block, so small block.
I ordered a small block. I'm going to drive it like that for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, I just feel it.
Well, luckily I had before I got right in that, I had somebody that did it. Yeah, it really got me started, and I took a class and picked up more stuff and just I was using a tweaker before. And make a change without shutting the car off and it idle, that makes all the difference in the world. Right. The quarter horse is God's hand. You go, okay, add a little fuel, okay, it likes that, let it down a little bit, no, don't like that. One more time, no, don't like that, back it down. First time. It is cheaper to
Quarter horse is even though I'm going to go have a really simple combination of it.
and the tweaker, you get free software, you can't make heads or tails up be equal. And I wish there was some more. Oh, absolutely. In the class, they showed us Tuner Pro or Tuner RT, whatever it was, and now, there could be more offices where if I found like where the injectors are all the setting for minimum pulse width, only goes so low. With tail box, that actually go lower.
Nice thing is, it's rid of all the small stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the first times.
There's so much of it on the master side to get, your max at 3-way valves, the max.
Yeah, I thought about making one into a vacuum pump and put a vacuum on the crankcase, but I got to work with it. This was extra, I got rid of that factory bracket and aftermarket one made. Yeah, they moved the alternator down to the bottom. So I had
Longer. That puts ACV.
Yeah, the front accessories on this one, like it's longer, I think, but.
No, it's shorter. It's not shorter. It's not shorter, but it's wider. Yeah.
Really?
You gotta keep it. It's not as tall, and it's shorter length, and it's wider. This is shorter. If you're
Looking good.
You're pulling,
Yeah.
Standing right on
That's why the SFD is based on.
See that look? This one.
You find out where you got something.
I want to do 6 of those, man.
Audio's on.
I almost consider going to manual steering so that I can and just do away with AC2 and have all that one right there. But I need AC.
Craig Moates,
Power steering is too nice.
would you mind setting up a new vehicle for him, or set up a new vehicle folder for him, so I don't have to find it among all the others? Already done? Okay, thank you very much.
Already got David out there. I put his bin because they didn't have plates, last 4 digits. up in vehicle simulation mode. If you want to just start that, you can sweep through low end or something if you want you to rub it in initially. So we can pull it out. If you wanted to tell me whatever you want to do on the dyno computer, I can administer it in there pretty quickly. And then I'll let you do the start stop, not me.
I didn't realize how loud the gears were until Jay Leno's got a Mobile, they're driving around, it's got a shed.
Hey, David, is this thing a street car, or do you trailer it to events?
I trailer to the track.
Trailer to the track?
I never know what's gonna break on it, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I trailer it.
But, I mean, do you drive it on the street? And talk to me about these heads. Not that familiar with them. How do they compare to a stock head?
In NA form, it made max power at 32 degrees atomic.
Okay.
They are
What gas is in this car?
93.
This was really the first all-out high-performance aluminum head available for 5 before
Okay.
AFR ever made heads for.
This is actually the last generation head that Canefield made before they went out. It's the 195s. It's similar to a high port because it's got raised exhaust ports, and the valve is got a slight turn to it. It's not canted, but it's rotated a little bit. Nothing fancy. Sort of like a wedge head. Valve trains a pain in the ass on them.
And you run it with the current tune that's in here?
Yes. Yeah, that's what was at the track.
Okay.
So it won't blow up. Not on that tune. I've flogged on it a few times. It should be all right.
What cam?
It's a Comp XC 258, 208 216 duration, little bitty thing. I had a 331 in the car with an automatic, and I kept thrust bearings and crank. And I took that cam and put it in here. The car went 115 miles an hour with that cam in A. Put the smaller cam in it, it went 109. But I had one. Yeah. I found with that Eagle crank, that cast crank, I found an old catalog that said not to be used with AOD emissions. I don't know why, never got an answer. Yeah. Apparently it has something to do with the where the thrust, the pilot bearing goes, but the button of the converter would go. They cut it differently.
So you're spinning it to 6,000?
55. I
Okay.
set the limiter a little bit higher because I had it set that the on-off was at the same RPM, so when it hit, it pow! So I just raised it up a little bit because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to have some cycle in there, like they have it set up stock.
Okay, I've just lowered it a little bit for dyno purposes, so in case I oops, and
Okay.
spin it past there. It's
Yeah.
not the end of the world.
At 6,200, I was getting valve flow at NA, so
Probably going to be lowering that with some boost behind it.
I backed the RPM down and just turned the boost up. Make the same power.
Guy in geology.
Okay, so aside from altering the rev limiter, this is going to be a first run on what you got.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll go from there.
I tell you what, I'm gonna get my boost controller and put on the 13 pounds. Since that's what I ran at the track last with. But
Where's it at now? Wastegate?
that's on the wastegate. It's on the 10.
Just leave it for right now. Okay. There's no sense in making this thing work harder than we have to till we get a little bit more zeroed in on it, And after we get it zeroed in a little bit more, by all means, we can turn the boost up and go from there.
What I did notice, I got close to getting the map dialed in. I used the injector settings that I found online, but the map, I didn't have anything. It's pretty close. It runs a little bit richer than what I'm commanding. I got 11.3 commanded, but it's like 10.8 to 11 in some spots, and some of them are dead on, but for the most part, it's a little bit richer. So at least it ain't leaner. That's kind of the way I looked at it.
Do you have the wideband on the GR?
Yes.
I forgot to check. Do you have it set for open loop all the time, or do you
Yes.
have? Yeah. I figured.
Yeah,
that.
because what I was finding with that short downpipe at idle,
It would
it
load up.
And especially when it's cold, even with it in open, for some reason it runs rich. Like we're talking 11 to 1 at idle until it gets to like 120, 130 degrees, and it acts fine. And I needed to, that was one thing I needed to figure out.
I think a little bit has to do with some of the fuel targets. It's still using the stabilize or the base open loop table. It switches over to stabilize as it warms up.
I tried finding it, and I could not find the table.
We'll look at that. No worries. No worries.
And the other thing, if I wanted to use closed loop, is there a way to bias that O2 sensor other than that exhaust pulse delay?
By bias, what do you mean?
Like, let's look at low RPM, you know, it's getting some reverse in there, and it's gonna read lean on purpose. Is there a way to
Fudge it?
Yeah.
I'll take a look. I don't know in Savaz off the top of my head. There probably is. There's typically a way you can fudge the O2 one way or another, but it may not be worth it if you're getting that much reversion at low RPMs. So.
I found even at cruise, it would kind of want to run lean on me. And it would get unhappy. It would lean out. I just, you know what, forget it.
Part of it, I think, there's your timing in cruise. We'll do a run on it the way it is, and we'll start.
Okay.
We'll go over some.
It's not a real big deal.
We'll go over some things because there's some things that, you know, just eyeballing it right off the bat. I know you could probably improve the drivability on the car a little bit by tweaking. So we'll take a look at it.
In open loop, it was good enough, so I didn't worry about it all that much.
Okay, at this point, pretty much all I've done is set up a data log, drop the rev limiter on the tune down a little bit in case I'm paying attention to something else other than the car when I'm on the dyno, and in case I hit the limiter. Set up a data log, wrote the data log configuration out to the core horse. I'm gonna rock out from here. I think I already got screen sharing going for you. So. You already disable your neutral safety switch or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Your thrush washers will thank you. that right there, David?
Yeah.
That's probably a large part of your startup trouble. That's adding, like, basically making a mixture run richer at startup. Zero that.
At 0.3, that's how that works, or?
It's basically like the stabilized table is adjusted by the startup table for a while. So zero out the startup table, and that probably will help things out a little.
I turned the trace on and was looking at it, data log, and trying to figure out what table it was working off of, but I never did find it. Hey, give me some RPM. Let's check the thing up.
If we have trouble, we'll switch it over to speed mode. Stop the test. Stop it.
Stop it.
Done.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
The dyno wasn't able to pick up on spark at all, so I stopped. We're gonna have to calibrate this thing a different way.
Did you change the calibration or Craig did?
I guess Craig did.
Okay. Yeah, he just changed it.
Well, we gotta change it over to speed load mode. So. Nope. Keyboard. The wireless keyboard. Where's the wire? I'm going to do a poll on this car, even though, you know, there's definitely some things at Part Throttle I want to work on. I just want to kind of see where it gets to wide open. So in case there's anything on the big end that has to get tweaked, it can get tweaked and we can don't screw everything to hell and back. So. Coolant temperatures are reasonable. Good of a time as any.
They might have melted a strap.
Oops, well, good thing it was a front strap, not a back strap. Oops.
That was pitiful. The downside is you're shooting right over the strap.
Oops. Do a little strap adjustment here. So that was about 11, 12. No, how much boost was that?
10.
Yeah, 10, 11, about there.
Maybe come over to this side instead of that side with the strap. One nice thing about cradle down rails.
Out of the way, the downside. See the downside right there?
What's fuel pumps on this thing?
255.
Okay, cool. So you're spinning it to 5,500 because you're wanting to keep it in one piece, correct?
Yeah, I figure I'd make the same power, lower RPM, and it'll keep it coming apart for a little while.
Yeah. Well, you'd make more power spinning it.
Yeah.
So there's
Well,
our
probably when it
spool.
hits 15 pounds of boost, too.
What's your spooling? 3,500 RPM, you got full boost pretty much. Okay. So let's take a look over things and see what we got.
370. 370. Dave, you want this man back on for the episode?
Probably wouldn't be a bad call. So up to, here's our little log. See the thing idling and then accelerating, hanging out for a second, and a pull. And zoom in here. So yellow now we have the mass voltage, okay? Fairly stable, but you know, much like the you know, as typical with a lot of blow-through systems, start to get a decent amount of wobble to them. See here pretty clearly where the turbo is spooling. Shape of the mass curves kind of coming up along with boost. So right about here, you know, we're right about 3,500 RPM. 3,500 RPM or so. Right about where we see on the dyno the pressure level off. You see the airflow kind of level off too. So it's good. Looking at our load, okay, where on the dyno where the load levels off, it's about what? 9 pounds. Okay. So we have a load of 130 on 9 pounds of boost. 9 pounds of boost is a little bit more. It's like a 1.6, 1.65 pressure ratio, something like that. So 130, you know, older heads that like, we're not expecting to have 100% efficiency here at 3,500 RPM. That load value makes some sense, okay? Now let's take a look at that. We're going to switch over now. Loads in yellow, okay? Look at the shape of the load curve and look at the shape of the torque curve on the dyno in blue. So pretty much, you know, comes up, the torque curve kind of comes up to where the gate opens. Got a little bit of bump there. Increases on the dyno to about increase on the dyno to about, you know, 4,200 RPMs. But, you know, we see load increasing a little bit more on the data logs. And then kind of following it up, we got pretty much constant load, pretty much constant torque to about 4,600 RPMs. 4,600 RPMs. And then we have 4,600 RPMs. Then on the dyno, we start to see torque level off. Here in the tune, loads just keeping on increasing. So right here, the load-torque relationship should follow each other a little bit more closely. It's not necessarily going to be like superimposed one on top of each other, but when you get into these situations where load is doing one thing and torque is doing another thing, that generally tells you that, you know, something's going on. And that's something I'm going to be willing to bet is probably the ignition timing is not right. That looking at the ignition map on this car, you know, there was a lot more timing at lower RPMs than there was higher RPMs. And I'm betting that probably just, you know, not, you know, there's more, the timing is a lot, at lower RPMs is closer to where it needs to be, which allows the curves to kind of follow each other. And at higher RPMs, there's just not enough timing in the thing to keep them, you know, following the same kind of trends. That's a guess, okay? We'll play with this thing. We'll figure it out one way or another, okay? One thing to notice looking at the dyno is that
from about 4,500 RPM to 3,000 RPM. So that's 4,500. The white cursor's at 4,500. And now it's at 3,000. In that range, the dyno observed much richer mixtures than the computer was commanding. Much richer. So we saw 10.5 at 4,500 and 10.5 at 3,000. But what were we commanding? I got things set up in Lambda, just doing the conversions, 11.3, 11.32. Okay, that's what we're commanding. So we're a lot, you know, overall, we're not, things aren't horrible by any means. Definitely not, okay? And if we look at dyno stuff by 5,400 RPM, if anything, we're maybe a little bit leaner than where we're commanding. So, you know, but things aren't horrible. And our load values are close enough to reality that, you know, I mean, this is, you know, you did a good job setting things up. Okay? So, not going to be doing any raping of injector slopes, not going to be doing any raping of displacement scalars, just going to kind of poke at the mass transfer, trying to get, you know, trying to get these air fuels to go to be a little bit closer to target. Another thing we're probably going to do, even before we do that, much like in the last car, how before we started poking the mass curve, kind of take a look at what timing was doing, okay? And we may want to make some adjustments to timing before leaning this thing out a whole bunch. Just might make sense to, like, do that because, you know, if there's not enough timing in the motor for the conditions at hand, it can skew the air fuels around. So you got to kind of think about that a little. So let's go back to our data log and see what's going on with timing. Now, in yellow, we have the ignition timing, okay? So up to here, up to, and so we have 32 degrees of timing in this thing, up to about 2,600 RPM. And, you know, we look, when did I floor it? I floored it at 2,000 RPM. So for 5,000 RPMs there, at wide open throttle, you got 32 degrees of timing in it. That low in the RPM band, 32 degrees of timing, it's probably a little much. You probably could actually pick up some torque and probably pick up a little bit of spool because you're going to be putting more of the burn where it needs to be, like by retarding the timing. That's probably one of the things that I'm going to be guessing here. Okay, so, you know, so pretty much here, this region where we see a timing drop is the region where the turbo is spooling, okay? And then, so it's spooled a little bit at 2,700 RPMs. We look at we'll look back to the dyno. We look at our green line over here. We look at our green line at 27 RPMs. We got what? 2 pounds of boost. Okay, you got a little baby, teeny bit of boost. Not a lot, just teeny bit. And then, you know, from that 2,700 RPM point up to 3,500 is pretty much where the turbo is spooling. So we have the timing dropping as the turbo is spooling. That's good. That's something we expect, you know. So we drop. We have. Oh, I think I just zoomed in on this and didn't mean to. Thanks, Craig. So, you know, at this point, we're running 32 pounds of boost, 2,700 RPM. Here, we're just going to call it, for sake of argument, you know, 3,700 RPM. 1,000 RPMs later, we've dropped 15 degrees of timing, okay? We'll say, for sake of argument there, we got 9 pounds more boost and 1,000 more RPM, 15 degrees less timing. So that's a lot of a timing drop. You know, turbo car or blower car, whatever, dropping 15 degrees of timing for 9 pounds of boost change when you also have, 1,000 RPMs more. You know, if you think about this thing as a naturally aspirated car, it should probably be picking up 4 to 5 degrees of timing in that 1,000 RPM window there, because it's coming up on peak torque, where peak torque would be for it naturally aspirated. That's a region where it's really going to be wanting more advance. So in a region where it would be wanting more advance, it's losing a ton. And we know that we should be losing some because of the forced induction, but what I'm basically wanting you to start thinking about here is just that, we got a couple of different forces that are, pulling our timing needs one way or the other. And, what we got going on is probably not, the bestest of way of doing things, okay? The other thing we see is that here, pretty much from 3,500 degrees on, we run a flat 17 degrees worth of timing. Hasn't blown up. It's working, okay? But again, probably the timing needs of this motor are going to be changing a little bit as RPM changes. And if we look at load for our guideline, we can use load as another guideline to what we should be doing with timing, okay? So in light of this, before smacking any kind of math transfer or anything like that, so looking at what we had going on with timing, we have flat timing from 3,700 RPMs to 5,500 RPMs. So pretty much on our dyno, we're talking about from about here to redline, we have the same amount of timing. We have 2,700 RPMs, 37 RPMs worth of RPM change and no change in timing. So right there, that is like a suspicious enough thing that, before I go whack it and doing anything to change the fueling on that, probably going to want to poke at that timing a little bit and just try to get a little bit closer to where the motor would be happy, with timing before, like, making too many big assumptions about air fuel. The air fuels we got now are safe. We're not going to, you're not going to melt anything down. You're not pushing the thing closer, to detonation. And nice, safe air fuels right now. So let's, my first poke at this thing is going to be timing. So we observed what happened. We observed what went on. We got our load measured. We got our timing measured at each load. So let's go back to the timing table, see what we got, and start making some decisions about where to poke from here, okay? Also keep in mind, we're running 10 pounds of boost now. When you were at the track with this car last, you said you were running 13. So we can turn the boost up a little bit from here and still be within, we can still be within conditions that this car has run in and not blown up, and not had any trouble with more boost. So that's something else we should be keeping in mind. We're looking at these timing tables, that this car, ran like it is with more boost. The boost is lower, okay? Not a bad thing, just, something to keep in mind. So with that said, let's go take a look at those timing tables. Spark borderline, our main timing table. One of the first things that stands out to me is that, the borderline table has been rescaled to give resolution in boost. While the car is seeing boost, it's going to have the potential to have a load greater than 1 or greater than 100. And, so this table has been scaled to give us some resolution there, okay? But the other things I'm also going to, first thing I notice is here that there's not a lot of changes with respect to load here, okay? That pretty much once this thing sees a load greater than the naturally aspirated, the 90% naturally aspirated load threshold, which may or may not be right for this motor, okay? Timing just kind of flattens out with respect to load. Now, the whole idea behind, if you're going to leverage this load-based spark, the whole reason why the Red Fox was switched over to the load-based spark was to allow different amounts of timing to be pulled for different amounts of load. And that, that's one of the strengths of the load-based system. Doing what you've done here simplifies it, and if you aren't exactly sure where you're going to end up in terms of load, it's a good way to keep from breaking things. But you're also kind of like, you know, you're not taking advantage of this to the full extent of what what you could. So one of the first things I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to the data log, and I'm going to take a look at, pick out a couple of these spots here in this borderline knock table, and figure out where was the load. Well, how much timing did it run? So essentially, I want to try to be able to kind of draw a path through this table that the engine took. If I kind of follow it along as the engine accelerated, what load did it see? What values were coming out of this table? Just so I can kind of see where did it go? Because if I want to try to make some changes to the timing in this table, one of the important things to realize is what cells are being used. You don't want to just say, oh, it's boosted, it's going to be using the highest load. No, it's not. We saw that looking at the load. About the highest load this thing saw, I think, was probably about 130, 140% load. And so if you make changes here to this 200% load row, it's not going to do a damn thing. Okay? The car's going to run exactly like it did before. So let's go back to the logs and kind of plot our way through this table and see what kind of values this thing ran. Okay? So I'm going to take a couple of these items off of our plot just so we don't have quite so many things to look at and it's not so cluttered. Okay, we got load, map voltage, RPM, and spark now. Pretty bare minimum, okay? So let's go take a look here at our table. So 2,000 RPM is about where I went wide open throttle, okay? Take a look at our log. Let's see. Let's find 2,000 RPM, okay? So where were we with load at 2,000 RPM? We were at 71%, okay? Now, just so we can find our way through this, just the time being, what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the degree of timing on the entire path we take. And if it's kind of ambiguous where we are, I'm going to subtract on both cells, okay? Just going to do this because BE is going to be kind enough to highlight that cell now and say, hey, you changed it. So we're going to have a trail of breadcrumbs to lead us through this table to see what the engine was doing, okay? Okay, the next point in our table is 2650. So we need to find 2650. So at 2650, our load was 90, or pretty much, or 89. We're going to call it 90 for sake of argument. It's close enough to 90. We'll roll with that. Let's also take a look there at our dyno. We're going to take a look at the boost and see at 2600. That's close enough for government work. So we got about 1.2, 1.3 pounds. The reason I'm doing that, just to kind of keep in mind, okay, what's happening here with this physical system. We're having a turbocharger spool up. We're getting more boost as RPM's increasing. So we're going to expect that load value to increase because of turbocharger. We're going to expect the load value to increase because of peak torque on this engine. Okay, this motor is going to make peak torque. If this motor was naturally aspirated, I'm going to guess it's probably going to make peak torque somewhere between probably 3,900 and 4,600 RPM. That's going to be my guess, just based on what you've said about it, heads, just just a reasonable inference. Okay, so I mean, do you know what this thing made, where it made peak torque naturally aspirated?
I have to go look at the graph.
Yeah.
Here, but
Am I within?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm bringing that up because if this was a naturally aspirated motor and we didn't have the turbocharger, we would be expecting load to increase up to peak torque, and then after peak torque, the load would fall off. We got a turbocharger on here though, so we have two factors: the turbocharger and the mechanical pumping of the engine that are driving our load value. But just keeping this in mind, we got a little bit of boost now at 2600. we got 20% more load, a whole hell of a lot more load. And, you know, so does that make sense? And I'm going to reserve judgment at this point because, yes, we're coming up on that, you know, we're coming up on that peak torque still, and we're going to have a whole bunch of load increase up to peak torque. And turbochargers, superchargers, they tend to just exaggerate the existing trends of a naturally aspirated motor, okay? So going back here, our table, 90% load, 2650 RPM, we're going to take out a degree. We got another trail in the breadcrumbs, okay? 3,300. There's our next data point. We'll call that close up. 3,350, 3,300. We're at 107% load, okay? 107. It's close enough to 100. We're gonna call it 100. It's a little bit more than 100, but just gonna call it 100. Next data point, 475. Keep doing that. 3,450, close enough for government work. Load, 125%. 125%, right there, on the money. Okay. 3,650. $36.65, good enough. 130% load. Which, for all intents and purposes, that's close enough to 125. I'll roll with it. Call it 125. So our next data point, we've got 3825 and 4,000. We'll pick two up at a time here. We're going to have 38, so okay, we'll call that 3825. We're at 135%. We're 136%. So for all intents and purposes, you know, our load, very, very similar now. We're moving away from 125 teeny bit, but for all intents and purposes, there's where we're going to be. So we're going to subtract 1. And we got 4,250 and 4,500. $42.13, good enough, 140%. And 4,500. 150% load. So a peak load of 160 at 5,500. Okay. So let's go back here. So we're kind of. I'm gonna say we're gonna call this 16. Okay. So there's the path that this car took through this table. If we go wide open throttle with this car again, there's a very good chance that the only cells in this table that are going to have any bearing on the timing operation of this car are going to be those cells. So what's one of the things about a load-based spark system that's kind of nice? You can have different spark at different loads. Okay. Right now we've taken out a degree of spark at those cells to give us our, you know, our trace through things. Okay. But if we think about this, okay, with the way that this spark was set up, it doesn't matter how much boost this car was running. If it was pretty much in boost, it's going to be seeing the same timing values. So we know that this car saw 3 pounds more boost on these same timing values already. It did. So if we have less boost, we have less cylinder pressure. If we have less cylinder pressure, we can throw more timing at it. We know we can throw more, or we have a very, very good guess that we can throw more timing at it because it's seen this timing with more cylinder pressure. Less cylinder pressure, we can throw some more timing at it. So one of the things I'm going to say right now, right off the bat, is instead of subtracting a degree of timing, let's go ahead and add a degree of timing along that whole path, or at least some of that path. Okay? Okay. Okay, I'm reversing this here. Now, so what we've done there is essentially we've bumped a little bit of more timing where it's operating now, with the assumption that's going to be correct that, you know, it's going to see more load when the boost goes up. So when we turn the boost back up again, it's going to be running the same tune it always was, okay? Well, we can kind of continue with this though, okay? If we're seeing lower load if we're going to see lower load, we're going to be able to put more timing in at these lower load levels. So, you know, and also at higher load levels, it might make sense to pull some more timing. You know, maybe we haven't gone there yet, and we don't know exactly where load's going to go on 13 pounds. 180 on, so it's going to get up here into this column here on 13 pounds of boost. So let's say we run 16 pounds of boost on this thing. It might see 200% load. And if it does, we're going to be having the same timing with more cylinder pressure. It's not necessarily a good thing. So we could go ahead and just, you know, pull some timing out proactively at higher loads. Okay? And likewise, as load decreases here, you know, now, is this going to make the car run any better at wide open throttle? Maybe not. But let's say you are driving it around on the street and you get caught at 3,300 RPMs and in second gear, and it's time to, you know, hit the gas. This thing's not going to follow. It's not going to build load nearly as fast because it doesn't have as much load on the car. That dyno run was done in fourth gear. And assuming that the dyno was mimicking how the car would accelerate in fourth gear accurately, then, you know, when you go on the street and nail it in fourth gear, it's going to, you know, your load values that you see should be fairly similar. But in second gear, there's not going to be as much resistance on the car. It's going to accelerate faster. That turbocharger is not going to see as much load. So you're going to be at some of these lower load levels. You know, you're going to see them, and they are going to come into play. And if you have those lower load levels optimized a little better, it's only going to help you out. So, okay. Now, I don't know if I can start another copy of BE without it crashing. So I'm going to start a copy of Tuner Pro, and we're going to take a look, just for shits and giggles, we're going to take a look at a stock Sabaza timing map, and we're going to compare it to what you got going on, because there's some other pretty big differences that, you know, we may want to think about and try to incorporate into this revision. Do I have the Tuner Pro stuff on?
Nope, I don't have it on here. So we'll give it a go with and see if we can just. Now keep in mind with all of this, okay, an alternative to doing the sort of, what if games that we're playing here and trying to make some guesses would be to steady state tune the car and the dyno to bring it into the point where it's at, 110% load, 100% load at 3,000 RPMs, get the air fuels okay, then dial the spark up and down and watch the real-time torque output of the dyno to tell you exactly where your optimal point is. You could do that. You could walk the entire spark table or as much of the spark table as you could get to. Would it be, is it going to take a long time? Yes. Okay? Because you're going to have to stop a lot for the car to cool off because that kind of steady state loading. I mean, it's the same kind of, if you're trying to do the higher load values, think about it. It's be the same thing as sitting there with your foot on the pedal, wide open throttle, 30 seconds, okay? On a car like this, how often are you going to do that? This thing runs, what, a 12-second quarter mile at 120-something miles an hour? So if you're sitting there with your foot on the gas for 30 seconds in a straight line, you're probably going 180 miles an hour. Just saying, that's one of the things with a dyno you have to be careful of, is that if you are using a dyno, you can do things with a dyno that the car won't ever see. And like, if you do that and you tune the car in unrealistic conditions, you might be in a situation where you have unrealistic results. So just keep that in mind. I'm just going to save this in case binary editor crashes. Yeah, but 6 of one, half a dozen of another here, okay? What I'm looking for here, we're going to look at the borderline table, okay? The scale here is different. So we're going to have to look at more than just, where it is in the grid. We're going to have to kind of look at the numbers. But one of the things you want to see is, like, David's spark table that this car came in here with had a completely different shape at a given load level than the factory table did, both at light load levels and wide open throttle load levels. Like here, for instance, at 90% load, which is the highest load that the factory calibration is mapped out for. So that's probably more load than the car actually saw. Our timing values down here, 2,000 RPMs, we're at 21, 22, 19 degrees, okay? Let's take a look here at, so we're talking right here, okay? 32, 30 degrees. That's a pretty big difference. Now, the factory calibrations, especially for the E4 stuff, are kind of notoriously soft. But is it that soft? That's 10 degrees of timing. Does this motor need 10 degrees more timing? I don't know these heads that well, but my gut feeling is going to say no. Maybe 4 degrees, 6 degrees more, maybe. But 10 degrees, and now, that's actually, glad you brought that up, okay? Let's go back here to this factory calibration and take a look at it, okay? One thing we can take a look at, or we're going to take a look here, this is 2D graph mode, okay? Each one of these lines corresponds with one load row. So you start off here up at the top, the 10%, 20%, 30%. Up here at the top, you got a lot of spark advance. And then, boom, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And you start seeing, one of the things you should see here is there's not a linear change in spark advance with load. You have, like, up here at low load, our spark advance is kind of uniform. It's really, really high, and it's pretty similar, okay? Then, boom, what happens here at 40% load? All of a sudden, we lose a ton of spark advance from changing from 30 to 40% load, okay? And then we still lose quite a lot going to 50% load, but then, you know, our changes, like, you know, especially up here at the higher RPMs, our changes are pretty, you know, pretty minimal. Down here in the bottom, on the other hand, we start to see a pretty big drop between that 50% and 60% load. And then, oh, we have this weird, like, everything's on top of each other. No more load-based spark. Why? Let's look at some of these values. So we're looking at, like, figure, what is it, 1,200 RPMs at 60% and lower. 60% and lower, 16 degrees. It's one of the things where this calibration pretty much gets to the point where it says, you know, I'm going to pull that's all the timing I'm going to pull out. There's not going to pull any more. Because if I pulled any more, like, let's just say, let's continue this trend here at, you know, 900 RPM. We drop 6 degrees of timing out here. We drop another 6 degrees of timing. We drop another 6 degrees of timing out here. Would be at 5 degrees. We drop another 6 degrees of timing at, would be at -1 degrees. We drop another 6 degrees of timing at, would be at -7 degrees. The motor's not going to run. That's not enough timing for the motor to run. So even if you have a calibration that's set up for 87 octane, one of the things you can take a look at one of these borderline knock tables, and if you're, you know, clever about it, you can pretty much say, okay, at this point, I think they're worried about fill in the blank. You know, are they worried about the motor knocking? Are they worried about giving the motor enough timing to run? Are they worried about giving it, you know, optimal spark timing for this condition? Are they worried about giving it enough timing to burn off all the crap and keep the emissions down, okay? These are all that, like, you don't have different spark tables in this car for all these different goals. They're all wrapped up in the one table, and when you look at an OE spark table like this, one of the things to kind of keep an eye on is what the hell are they doing? What are they trying to achieve? So, knock, okay? What are some of the things that really contribute to knock? Cylinder pressure. Where do we get the most cylinder pressure? Peak torque, okay? Why are they perfectly happy having a borderline table where the highest entry is 5,000 RPMs and the motor spins to 6,000 RPMs or 5,500 RPMs? Because they're not having to worry about peak torque at 6,500 RPMs. The peak torque's already come and gone. They've got their peak torque right there. You know, they've already got it. They've already got it, okay? So the other big thing that they need to worry about with detonation, with knock, is the big thing that really comes into play is high loads, small piston speeds, i.e. low RPM, lugging it, okay? Put the car in 5th gear, 1,000 RPMs and floor it. It's about the nastiest thing you can do to a manual transmission car. It doesn't matter, supercharged or naturally aspirated. Why? That piston's moving really slowly, comparatively speaking. The amount of time while it's moving slowly for bad things to happen is huge compared to, say, at 5,000 RPM where that piston's moving a whole hell of a lot faster, okay? And when you, like you were saying with some of your off-road vehicles and having the issues with them at a low RPM, high load, you know, you're putting all that cylinder pressure of high load in there with the low RPM and the slow piston speed. You got tons of time for bad shit to happen, and you have, you know, tons of cylinder pressure, or comparatively tons of cylinder pressure in there to kind of help things along, okay? So this low RPM, high load lugging is something to, you know, one of the things when you're talking about a calibration done for octane, it's, you know, that's one of the main places where you will see the effect of octane in an OE calibration. Is you'll see that on that how much sparks gets pulled out and how quickly it gets pulled out
on the bottom end of the car, especially right off idle in the region where it's pretty much assumed that no sane person in their right mind is going to try to make the car accelerate at high load from that point. So if you're an idiot, below, and with the tune that's in there now, you have a ton of spark in there below 1500 RPM, below 2000 RPM at higher loads. And realistically, there's probably too much. It's probably too much for 93 octane. If there's any part of your spark map that made me like twitch a little bit when I first looked at it, that was it. Straight up, that it's just, and the thing is though, is like the way you drive the car though, you don't go and put the car in 5th gear at 1500 RPMs and floor it. You just don't do that, You're going to start at a higher RPM. You're going to start in a lower gear, okay, where you have more mechanical advantage and the thing's going to accelerate faster. It's not going to spend as much time just hanging out, like beating the piss out of itself, okay? So this whole point of going back to the OE calibration, what we're looking at here, we're looking at a couple of things. We're looking to see, okay, where do they kind of say it's important to start making changes to spark based upon load? And they say, okay, at 50%, 40%, 50%, we're going to start pulling a bunch of spark. And with less load than that, give it all the spark you want. With more load than that, we're just going to try to pull a little bit out as it happens. But that's kind of where they said, okay, this is the line in the sand where we're really going to start changing the spark around at. That's one thing we're going to pay attention to. The other thing we're going to pay attention to is just this, at this maximum load, especially kind of, yes, this calibration is going to be soft. And, with stock, I can tell you with stock cylinder heads on this vehicle, it's probably going to be, what we're going to need is probably going to be, that's probably more realistic, 32 degrees on the top end, okay? But 32 degrees on the top end, we're still going to want to have some kind of roll-off in terms of the spark. We're not going to want to have 32 degrees of timing at 1100 RPM. We're going to want to have less. It's just that's the way, you don't need as much timing when that piston's moving slower. You don't need all that advance, and it can be counterproductive. It might not be enough to make the motor knock and cause any damage, but it's also not going to help anything. So we got two things to keep in mind now, okay? 40%, 50% load is kind of where the OEMs say, okay, that's the turning point. We're going to start putting a lot more or a lot less spark on either side of that. And that here, okay, figure between 1,000 and 4,000 RPMs, we got about 20 degrees of timing advance, purely as a function of RPM at high load. Okay? That's probably a reasonable assumption. Maybe a little soft on the bottom. We probably may not necessarily want to have 20 degrees of rise. Maybe we'll try 15. But we're going to want to have those lower RPM values substantially lower in spark than when we start getting up closer to the meat and potatoes of our power band. We're closer to peak torque. Okay? So that's what we're gaining from looking at the stock timing map. We're gaining a point of inflection point for load, where the change in load really starts making a difference in terms of the change in spark, and kind of just getting a feel for how much RPM matters for ignition advance. Just a rough idea. So I'm going to close this tune up so we don't get confused at this point. Go back to the tune we're working on. Okay. So at 90% load, between 4,000 and we'll just say 1,500 RPM, on our OE tune, we saw 20 degrees of spark deflection. On our tune here, we see 0. the happier place is probably going to be somewhere in the middle there. And that's one thing to work on, okay? Likewise, you know, some of those popping that we were hearing on this thing at extremely light load, it didn't have enough spark advance. On our OE tune at 10% throttle, this thing's running 55 degrees of spark advance. Why? Because they're old dinosaur cylinder heads, and they really do need that much spark advance with a lean mixture that takes a long time to burn, and you know, the no cylinder pressure to worry about. We don't, you know, it's so, you know, there's such a weak cylinder pressure. We don't have to worry about detonation. We got a lean mix that takes a long time to burn, and especially getting up into the higher RPM band. You know, we got RPM helping, you know, putting a demand, creating a demand for spark. So realistically, that 30% column that, or row, sorry, that you got here, it's probably way low on it. And 50%, that was the magic point, okay? When we got to 50% in that OE calibration, it was pulling a bunch of spark out because you're actually starting to ask the motor to work versus just kind of idle and putt along. And then from there, we had a little bit more linear, smooth relationship. So I'm just going to say, you know, we got 93 octane. It's run like this for a while. You know, probably don't want to whack too much out of it. So I'm just going to say, just for a starting point, going to whack 3 degrees there. But likewise, you know, 30% load, this thing was popping. It needed more advance there. How much more? I don't necessarily think 55 degrees. That's maybe pushing it a little bit and maybe advancing the timing for the purposes of, you know, trying to get emissions stuff taken care of and have a really complete burn in the chamber for emissions purposes as opposed to actually extracting work from the gasoline. But, you know, we're still way soft on it. So let's add 10 degrees and see what that does. You know, might be, you know, it might, you know, make a big difference. It might, you know, not, but chances are it's not going to hurt anything because that's still far less than the OE calibration would have used. So if you were using a stock computer to run this engine or run it naturally aspirated, let's just say, okay, it'd be seeing a hell of a lot more timing with a stock computer, and it's not going to blow up. You could put these heads on a motor, run on the stock computer. It's not necessarily going to be the happiest thing in the world, but it's not going to blow up either. So keep that in mind, okay? So also, from 50% load, we start to see, you know, timing decrease as a function of load pretty linearly from 50% load onwards. Let's just start somewhere where we don't have to kind of think that hard about what's going on here. You know, okay. Looking at our dyno, let's look back at our dyno graph for a minute. Figure from 3,500, 4,200 RPM, 4,200 to 4,600 RPM. We'll call that peak torque, okay? So that's our, like, you know, our point where we actually have to kind of start thinking about, oh shit, you know, cylinder pressure, is it going to get in the way of things? Below that, you know, not so much. RPM, so looking at this, looking at what we have going on here, trying to kind of reconcile some of the trends that we have with what, you know, what we're kind of expecting. Basically, you know, the big thing that's going to be kind of the big kind of trend bucking thing is starting here at 3,300, 3,500 RPM. How we have more timing here than we do higher up at the same load. Eek, you know, that means one of two things. There's too much timing at the lower RPM. There's not enough at the higher RPM. Realistically, the answer here is probably a bit of both, okay? But we're going to take the safe route, and we're going to get rid of the timing at low RPM first. And if we start losing power and losing torque, we know it's the wrong decision. We can put it back in, we're not, you know, we're not going the path of danger right off the bat, taking the safe road. So with that said, I'm just going to flatten this out, copying column by column, so it's the same in each one. So now at least, you know, we're as far back as 3,600 RPM. You know, our timing is following reasonable trends. So that means these increases here, they got to go away. They got to go away. So now we have a decrease in timing from 34 to 3,300. That's so close. We're not going to make any changes. Okay, we're still from 33 to 2,600. You know, we might want to scrub some more timing. 2,600 to 22,000. We can't have more timing at 2,000 RPM than we have at 2,600 RPM. That just doesn't work out. So what are we going to do? Pull a little bit more. And ask yourself, okay, what's it going to take to get here? What's it going to take to actually see these RPMs and these loads? To a certain extent, you're not going to be able to do it. How the hell with a turbocharged car are you going to see 200% load at 1,400 RPM? You're not going to. You can't spool the turbo there. You can't even, I mean, 200% load at 1,400 RPM, that's probably 16, 18 pounds of boost at 1,500 RPM. You can't do it. But the thing is, you know, I don't know. It hurts my eye when I see a timing table and it doesn't, the trends don't make sense. It just, you know, and that's a Dave thing. So you're going to have to, like, forgive me for it. You know, yeah. Okay. So at this point, we've taken pretty much the, you know, the colors are indicating what we've done. In this band here that the motor is operating in, once the turbo is kind of spooled up a little bit, that red means we got more timing there. And this big block here on the lower RPM, medium to higher load, where, you know, we kind of passed through it a little bit, we got a little bit less timing. So when we do our dynograph this next time, one of the things that we're going to want to take a look at, do we lose power below 3,600 RPM? Do we lose torque? And if we do, then, well, it really does need that extra timing. We can put some of it back in. And we also know if we lose timing on the low end by doing this, we almost certainly need more timing on the top. Because we're not going to have the timing be all high in the bottom and then just drop down at the same load with RPM. Okay? So we had some issues with air fuel on the first run that, you know, weren't entirely happy with, but we're going to punt entirely on them, I'm going to say. We made some pretty drastic, some pretty significant differences or changes here for, you know, to the, some pretty significant changes to the timing table. So let's see what that does before, you know, let's see what that does before go mucking about with the mass air transfer and changing our load about as well as changing the fueling about. Let's just see what timing does first, have a more controlled experiment, and go about our business. I'm just, again, just smoothing out these changes here a bit because they bother me. So now, if we graph our timing table that we have now, we should see something that at least from a bird's eye view, without looking at the numbers themselves, looks a lot more like an OE timing table. Oh, I clicked 3D, not 2D. I apologize. You see here? So what do we have here? 30, 50, 70, 90, and boost. That, you see, we have that big gap there. So we didn't have that. Think about what's going to be going on there. So that's definitely going to be something to kind of definitely going to be something to come back to. May even take a look at that right now and add ourselves a degree and not have quite such a sharp transition. So now, it's not even spacing, but if we think about what's happening here, 30, 50%, 70%. So this is kind of 70 and 90 here. This is kind of where that motor is operating naturally, would be operating naturally aspirated. And then once we start getting the boost, we pull out a bunch of timing. So we're heading the right direction here. Heading the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, push it out. We'll run the car again, and we'll see, do we lose a bunch of power on the bottom or not? And if we don't lose a bunch of power on the bottom, it's a good thing. So wouldn't be surprised if we get this right, if we end up even seeing a little bit, better spool on the bottom, getting the bottom end, closer to where it needs to be. So I'm going to get this thing started, give it a chance to warm up a little bit. It's probably cooled off pretty noticeably during our conversation, and grab something to drink. I'll be right back.
So basically, what you've done with this so far was just pretty much time.
Yeah, that's it. All I've done is timing. We've just kind of we've looked at the dyno, looked at the data we have on the dyno to get an educated, to make some educated guesses, some inferences about where to go with timing based on what we know about the car, knowing that it's been run harder with this timing level, about, seeing where the horsepower and torque peaks are, and knowing what that's going to mean in terms of cylinder pressure, and kind of being able to just, take the physical data that we have from the dyno that we've measured and take a look at the calibration data that we have on the laptop and kind of put the two together and, try to make some good decisions and make some good guesses and figure out what direction to go based upon what we got. Okay. On a first glance, I'm going to say this run looked a little bit better. Our air fuels that were kind of up or down and then up again were more across the board. Okay, Craig is helping me out here with awesome. Okay, so we did lose some on the bottom end. 3,600 below, we lost some. But here, at 2,500 RPM, torque's pretty much equal. And yeah. And from 4,200 up, that little bit of timing, remember, that's where we increased timing. We saw a slight, ever so slight increase in torque and power. Let's see, we do this guy here. No, we do this guy. So blue there is our engine torque. So we can see pretty much from so from about 3,650 and up, our torque will increase till about 4,800. And we did a little bit better before, above 4,800. So let's go back, take a look, see what we did. What I just did there is loaded a compare bin. Loaded a compare bin so that we can, oh no, I meant to do this. Here. I don't know what happened. I want to make sure we got the right files here. So that's the one we just ran. Okay, so looking at our dyno graph, below 3,600 RPMs, down to 2,500 RPMs, we lost a little bit of torque there. So, so here at 2,600 RPMs, it was happy. Here at 3,300 RPMs, not so much. Here at 3,400, not so much. So let's just copy over our old values and see where they fit. Let's see how they fit. They don't really. So okay, 30.
it in.
What I'm doing, I'm just copying the 3600 values downwards, okay? Look at, Craig's pulling it back up. Okay, there we go. So up until about 4,200 RPMs, we actually saw, up until 4,200 RPMs, so here, we actually saw pretty good gains from increasing the timing. Not huge, but pretty good. But beyond that, not so much. So
For the dyno chart, when I double right click, it'll turn red and hide that spot.
Okay.
So currently you're looking at, I annotated it, so you're looking at the second run.
okay.
Right,
So if I double right click, I can see the first.
run.
Okay.
So you can add the first run or subtract it by double right click.
Okay. Awesome. So, in terms of, timing, well, pretty much up to 4,200 RPM, it did better with more timing. Let's take a look at that most recent log. 1T. Right click, drag, zoom in. So that's a good question. So before, at the beginning of the run, we're about 86, and getting up there, 116, 120, 124 towards the end, 128 towards the end of the run. That's not horrible, but it's getting hotter. This thing could benefit from better intercooler, benefit from turbochargers pumping out cooler air, but not hard. Okay, so we said 4,200 RPM was about where the spark gains quit. So somewhere in there. So about 135% load. Okay. At this point, so when it starts, and what's happening with load from there? Load's increasing, getting closer to 160 up top. Okay. So really, in this region, it was not happy about having more spark there. We put a little bit more spark in. It wasn't having it. It was happier with less spark in it there. So let's give it that. So looking at this also, so 4,200 is where our peak torque was, and pretty much from about 4,800 onwards, torque was flat, but not killed. Well, I kind of don't like the RPM scale on this table, because where we want to make, where things are changing in terms of horsepower and torque, we don't have data points to play with on this table. So if we say want to raise the timing at 5,400 RPM, but leave it alone at 4,500 RPM, we can't do that right now. We don't have the right data points on this thing. So, that's probably, at this point, added some timing to this, this table, at higher RPMs. And probably going to rescale it just because, like, look here, you know, we now have the same timing for 1, 2, 3 of these columns. Timing's the same. We're not making it, like, having those columns and having the timing stay the same. It's not doing us any good, you know. If we had, like, one of those spots to use for 5,500 RPM, might do us some good, you know. So, if we say maybe looking at our torque graph, if we had a point for 3,000 RPMs, looking at our torque graph, that's kind of like where this thing really kind of shot up there in terms of torque. Maybe it would be good to be able to make an adjustment at 3,000 RPMs that's, you know, make it 3,000 RPMs different from, you know, 3,300 RPMs where we do have a point. So we made some kind of basic okay. Another thing, okay, I noticed on that run, we added timing, and this thing was still blowing like smoke under high load. Not like I'm burning oil smoke, but fuel was not combusting fully smoke, which means one of two things. There's still way too little timing, or one of three things. There's way too little timing in it, there's way too much fuel in it, or the plugs aren't gap tight enough. Was pretty much the three choices. And it very well could be more than one of them. Our wideband, regardless of the fact that there's some unburnt fuel coming out the exhaust, our wideband's telling us that we're at 10.5 air fuel. That's pretty fucking rich. So probably it's coming time. We added some more timing, and the timing kind of helped stabilize those air fuels and make them more consistent, but it didn't really lean them out at all. It's probably time to lean things out a little bit, okay? And if we get those air fuels to say 11.2, 11.3, where you're targeting, and we're still kind of seeing a little bit of sootiness, it very well may be time to pull the spark plugs out and gap them down a little bit. Where are they at now?
28-ish, maybe 30.
That's probably way too big for the amount of. I mean, I would probably. I don't like pulling spark plugs on V8s because there's just not a lot of room. It's pain. Okay, especially on something like a Lightning, you curse life up and down a couple times before you get them out. I'm a pretty big fan of gapping them down tighter than would be necessary. I can tell you that, 35 pounds of boost and, a much bigger turbo is going to need about 17, 18 gap. But, with the, it looked like you just had a standard, like a aftermarket coil, but otherwise stock ignition. You got an ignition box too? Oh, that's a good start. So, I mean, I don't know. I'd still say 28 is maybe a little on the big side. 25, 24 is probably where I'd, start. But we'll lean this thing out, see how much that helps, and go from there. We're going to rescale the timing as well. Now, on our load axis, we also, on our load axis, well, the highest value that we've seen so far is 160. And you say on 13 it'll hit about 180. So maybe leaving the load axis alone for the time being is not a bad idea, because we're going to turn the boost up. We want to make sure we don't run off that. So, okay, but we definitely want to rescale this RPM axis so we can get a little bit better. So to do that, we need to look at function 016. There we go. So things aren't too, I mean, might want a little bit, I mean, right about here is where I start to get upset with the scaling. Maybe if we went 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000, 4,500, 4,000, 4,200, 4,500, 5,000, 5,500. So, you know, where were we? We were... no. So 2,000 is not horrible. So 2,500 or 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 3,500, 4,000. So 2,500 is 3, 3,000 is 4, 3,500 is 5, 4,000 is 6. 4,000 is 6, 4,250 is 7, 4,500 is 8. 4,500 is 8, 5,000 is 9, 5,500 is 10. There we have it. Okay. So why did I choose those points? Okay. 3,000, it looks like we got something going on the dyno a little bit. Might be nice to be able to dial that in a little bit closer. 4,250, because that's right about where peak torque is. Might be nice to be able to put a little bit less spark there, since, you know, this tune, we're already we're going to be starting to change gears from making more power and more torque with it to, you know, keeping this thing safe and limiting the cylinder pressures. Being able to just, you know, take that peak torque point, put it aside, and treat it specially with kid gloves is a good thing, you know? And then the 5,000 and 5,500, it's an opportunity to put a little bit more spark back in after we've, you know, passed that danger point of the peak torque scenario. So now we have the RPM indexes to do it. Just take a look here and see if our spark table still looks vaguely okay. You know, play the game here. I'm adding a degree as we move past peak torque. With RPM. And we said that, you know, as the load got higher, as load got higher, that it wasn't really all that happy about the spark being added. We've added a bunch of spark. So, you know, make sure here, looking as we transition from 125 to 150 load, which is, we're, you know, up top here, we got 3 degrees pulled out. Let's make sure we carry that on down. Make sure that, keep it. So, I'm looking at our dyno plot. Basically between 3,650 and 2,500, where we shaved a bunch of timing off this thing, lost a decent amount of torque. So let's make sure that, you know, 2,500, you know, pretty much haven't touched. Where were we load wise in that region? Let's see here. So 2,600, we were at 90% load. So 100, 110, 120. Okay. So this right here, or to be more precise, this right here,
these cells were the ones where retarding that timing mattered, okay? And where are we at load-wise? 100% load. That's more than you'd get naturally aspirated. So probably, you know, one way to fix this, or to possibly fix this, add some more timing there. So we scrub, you know, we scrub a little bit less timing. So now following this, we're going to not, you know, as we move here from 2,500 RPM, as we start moving up here into 100% load at 3,000 and 3,500 RPM, we're going to have more timing in it, timing numbers that were closer to our original. And hopefully we'll get the torque back. Okay, and if not, well, know what to do. And just for safety's sake, I'm just looking here. I'm going to scrub a degree of timing here. Just because, you know, we know 4250 is our, peak torque. You know, this is a motor that's going to be knock limited, and more than that, you know, this is a motor where we're kind of flying on hopes and dreams in terms of how you're very much in the danger zone for the mechanical parts. So, yep. Okay. So 2 runs, too rich. Let's take a look at that and figure out what we need, where we need to be looking for that. So we're looking at the air-fuel ratio. You know, really from 4,500 to 3,000 RPMs, it's way too rich. Okay. So let's look and see here. 3,000. Let's look at our data. See what our data tells us. What are we commanding? So we're commanding 11.3 at 3,000 RPMs, pretty much. And what are we getting? You know, 10.4 AFR. So let's figure that out. So 70. So we're commanding a lambda of 77. We're getting a lambda of 70. That's, you know, so 91%, 92%. So, yeah. Where are we at in terms of MAF voltage in this range? So 3,000 RPMs, we're at basically 2.5 volts. And 4,500, we're at 3.3 volts. And by red line here, where we're at 3.64 volts, we're basically close to where we're commanded. So 3 voltages to pay attention to. 3.64 volts, we're getting what we're commanding. You know, 3.3 volts is the end of the worst richness, and the end of the worst richness, and about 2.5 volts is the beginning of the worst richness.
Math transfer. We got our 3 points, okay? Let's find them. 2.50, beginning of the worst richness. 3.3, oh, nicely halfway in between these 2 points is the end of the worst richness. So first, we came up with 92%. I'm going to say 95%. Not going to quite go that far. Okay? But you can just see, looking at that curve, that we kind of jacked that curve up. Okay? This thing, you know, it wasn't horribly rich or lean beforehand, but you know, so let's see, at 2,500 RPMs, we're commanding 0.87 or 12.7 to 1. We're achieving, looking at the dyno, 11.8 to 1. So we're still way rich there. Realistically, we can probably carry those changes down. We're pretty rich all the way in part throttle. So just for the hell of it, it's going to pretty much carry it on down. Here, looking at here, the math voltage is in yellow. That pretty much idling here, 0.76. And then so this whole 1.2, 1.3 and up at part throttle, it's a little rich. So let's see what happens if we just carry those changes all the way down. Because as it stands, we've jacked the math curve. We'll carry them to 1.4. We don't have to necessarily do quite as much. Okay. So right here in this area, around 2.5 volts, you know, things are definitely, math curve's looking a little ragged. So 2.5 volts right there. 2.71. Not going to worry too much about how it looks right now. Just go off the math, okay? So by 3.6 volts, things were kind of better. And we didn't touch this 3.4 volt because, you know, our little endpoint was halfway between those two. So, but maybe we should do something to it. You know, maybe take out 2% just to try to, like, you know, make it more. Maybe we'll take out 1% just to do that. So we made some changes to the math curve, try to lean it out a little bit, change the timing curve around pretty good amount, and you know, now it's time to give it another whirl. If someone wouldn't mind kicking the fans on, that'd be appreciated.
You don't like it. What? Always need more. That's the problem. It's so easy to turn it up.
Okay, so looking at our most recent run, the bright blue versus bright blue and bright red versus the run before where we were a little bit down, things are way up. One other thing to note is the shape of the curve has changed a little bit. You know, you can see that the torque has stayed flat all the way out to 5,500 RPM pretty much. We no longer have a torque peak at 4,200 really. It just keeps going. So that's good, okay? Just for the sake, I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the first test as well, just so we can kind of compare to where it came in. And because, you know, we might still be down a little bit in the low end. Let's take a look. So, yeah. But one other thing just to notice, okay, is that looking at the green graph, namely boost, okay, we don't have the same amount of boost at the same RPMs. Probably because, if I had to make an educated guess, I wasn't being a good dyno operator. One of the things that, you know, dynos are very, very reproducible machines if you drive repeatedly. If you start a run, you know, if you go wide open throttle at 1,500 RPM one time and 2,000 RPM the next time, even if you set your dyno to start at 2,500 RPM in both cases, you're not going to get repeatable results out of the thing. And I think, you know, that's probably a my bad, because I mean, you can see that the boost is varying a bit. So at this point, honestly, like this thing's behavior below 3,500 RPMs with regards to, you know, in terms of how much power it's making, really isn't going to have that much bearing on how fast the car goes. Okay, and if you know, it's got, you know, substantially less timing in it in that region and about the same amount of power, not too horrible in terms of losses, you know, then you know, let it go. Let's turn up the boost a little bit and see where it goes. Let's tune up the boost a little bit and see where it goes. And one other thing I noticed also, just accelerating up to, you know, where I was going, there's been definitely, I think we helped the MAF curve in part, you know, but I think overall, I think we did good things for the MAF curve. Because let's take a look here. You know, look at that. I mean, on the air fuels, the black line, how flat it is. We're commanding the same air fuel ratio. We're doing pretty damn well in terms of like air fuel ratio deflection there. That's probably 0.1, 0.2. We might not be exactly at what we're commanding, which is going to be, you know, we're commanding like right about there, okay? So we're running a little bit richer, 11.1 there, 10.8 there. So we can probably lean things out a little bit more. You know, we can probably lean things out a little bit more, maybe 1%, 2%. I mean, it's running, it's happy. You know, let's let the turbocharger do the heavy lifting, not air fuel ratios do the heavy lifting. So figure pull 1% or 2 out of the MAF, transfer from there on up, no more than that. Down in the bottom, the changes we made, it got a little too lean at some of the spots at part throttle. So probably going to try to pay attention to that a little bit more on the next run, just so that we can go back, fix those a little. Turn the boost up, see where it goes, maybe pull a spark plug, see how the spark plugs look, and then go from there. Okay? So. So right now, looking on the laptop here in binary editor at the data log, trying to kind of pick out our data points. So from pretty much where, you know, 2800 or so, 2800, the MAF's at 2.35, so we're going to call it 2.4 volts. From there on up, we can probably lean it out a teeny bit. And also keep in mind that the dyno does not load the car the same as a track or the street does. So definitely double check your boost controller settings before, you know, romping on it too much. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to be close because it's a loading dyno. And it's going to be trying to approximate the load on the car as it's moving. But just double check it before you go. Oh. You know, like boost gauge?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
If it goes over 13, it clutch line.
Ah, so we have a safety mechanism.
Which one you got? The stock replacement, stock flywheel, a Ram pressure plate. I called them. They said it's like 2,400 pound pressure plate, but the disc that changed from just an all-around organic drag disc to
Still gold.
Careful, 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 careful.
yeah.
You're stepping on my...
I just saw it move and I said, oh my God.
Yep.
It's still very good. What was the boom?
Exhaust backfire like the...
Combustion?
Yeah.
So it's not as bad as 6 o'clock. Just goes in line on the weight gauge on the bottom, so that all it is, yeah, there's a spring there to check on, and you screw the end in, it pushes the ball, it overcomes the pressure, and then it will stick like the weight gauge and the yeah, I was trying to figure that out too. But I got an electronic solenoid that have boost, not built boost that will hold the weight. Why is that? Yeah, exactly. My stepmom there. Yeah, I want to stick out on that. You just gotta make them think where you're going and they jump and then. The mind game.
Yeah, I'm saying mind game. Play where it's supposed to play. Pull up, light on light, wait till you're upon the lights, run and roll into it. I'll even roll into it. Look at the bracket race. You're going to just lock in. Get that extra time and land on the dial. But that was a good race.
Oh, bitty. That, yeah, this thing, will make power probably all the way to 6,000 if I were to,
It wouldn't climb, it would just be flatlined, huh? Just steady power.
when I hit the limiter, I had the limiter set at, I moved the limiter up a little bit, I moved the dyno up too, but evidently not quite enough, okay? I had the limiter set, I believe, at 5750, and it made power to 5750. I had the limiter set all up.
Yeah.
It was just, if you look at,
power higher.
it was just starting to nose there, you see? That red line, I mean, it hadn't even really gone flat yet there, so. That run, we had like 12 pounds of boost. So, pretty much did what it did okay that time. Got a little teeny tiny bit lean, like mid 11s by red line. See what's going on. So. Starting to see it.
So you're kind of losing the mid-range power there because of it, and then the fully deep power. And if you use a roof to get flat power curve, you keep the air a whole bunch. And the control is similar to a Homer. Yeah. So, I tried the L1 and she was fine. Like 30 thought losses. I'm trying to build it and it wants to let me add times. And it can get range or something. Higher than that. Literally probably 30 pounds. And all you have to do is add spring on the wastegate and just raise the tire. It's always going to keep the assist from.
What's up, man? You making power in this thing?
Okay. Trying to like avoid spinning parts. I mean, it's a stock bottom end,
Yeah.
so 450 on the stock bottom end is, it's into the territory where you tread carefully.
Yeah. Man, I'd push it harder than that. 550, 600, 650.
I don't think he's got the clutch for it.
No?
No,
Oh, man.
that's sad.
That's it. You just find a weak point, you fix that, move on to the next weak point.
That is very true. That's very true.
Hey, where's everybody else at?
Whoever, Craig?
Yeah.
I think he's inside the house. He's manning the video. We're videoing and recording and stuff.
Ah,
so.
gotcha.
Turn it up more, or leave it where it's at. Go for it. It's your.
I'm just worried about that air temp getting too high and causing a problem.
Got a nitrous
You're gonna be meaner to this thing on the street probably. Go ahead and crank it up another little bit. Call it a day. Where are you worried about this thing's got he's worried about valve train components coming apart
Oh, that's always fun.
a bit, so.
What kind of heads they got on this Jeep? Canfield?
Canfield.
Yeah. They take a whole lot of time in them Canfields. I think they MBT out like 27 degrees, something like that, on all engine,
Mhm.
Why did that go so quick, huh? Hold it like man, does it?
Yeah, I mean it's seeing like mid-teen, like high teens, 20-ish timing on like 10, 12 pounds or so. So
Yeah, that ain't.
that's fine. That's fine.
Amazing. Basically, you got a chick mower and spring. Yep. Yeah. The spring pushes the ball.
Oh, what you got here? Oh, BE you using?
Yeah, I'm just using it.
Oh, yeah, that.
Huh? I was gonna use Tuner Pro, but we haven't gotten there yet.
No?
Yeah, I'll get around to it. So.
It does the same thing except it bleeds off sooner, so you actually get lag. They say that because you got air leaking through there, it's not as accurate. When the temperature changes and stuff, you get a different amount of air. Better anyway. You don't have to fight the problem. Don't grab it when it's hot. Just don't grab it when it's hot. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he'll let you know.
I'm wondering about the plug gap on it too, a bit, because it's still a little smoky under higher load. So.
Oh, gotcha.
So. Here, you want that top? I'm gonna drive.
No, not really, man.
Oh,
You don't need me for nothing, do you?
you can have fun. Come on.
I'm pretty useless.
Oh shush. You're so far from useless. You're the king of Sebastian, man.
Oh, yeah? Hey, you should consider putting some mufflers on that thing, running it to the back.
Yeah, well, you know.
3 o'clock in the morning driving past the police station, they might not like that too much.
I'm gonna pull a little bit more timing out of this thing just because. More beat boost, pulling some more timing.
Wow, I really wanted that 1 extra pound.
It also got a little bit lean up top. I actually let out of that thing, and so it kind of it coasted through the what do you call it? The end. But yeah. See there, it started to go lean. The thing is, let's take a look at this, because did you put a relay on that wall, bro, when you put that wall, bro, in?
No, factory stuff. You think that pumps?
The reason I say that is if you look at the air-fuel ratio here, okay, you see how it kind of picks a point. It's flat, 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 flat.
Yeah,
I think you just tripped. Okay. It's okay. We got. Okay.
progressively getting.
Yeah, when it kind of just picks a point and keeps going, and you know, and that it goes leaner, but it's that kind of nice flat diagonal. That's generally that flat diagonal going lean is a sign that it's not getting enough fuel. If we were to put a fuel pressure sensor on, I bet you'd be, you know, right about 4,200 RPM on that run. You'd be tanking fuel pressure.
Well, it's got a gauge, but.
Yeah, well, you want to be looking at that. And,
yeah.
So let's take a look here. I'm betting we're going to see the same thing happen on that. The same thing did happen on that last run. Okay, but well, let's look at time. Okay, so on the last run, you see the same sort of thing happened, but it started, you know, later on. Okay, this more boost, more torque, more fuel required, and it's
not keeping up.
It's not keeping up. So in terms of like what we're doing in terms of power here, we're done. Yeah. You know, we found a limit of this system, and the limit of this system is your Walbro. You put a relay, 10 gauge, 12 gauge wire feeding it, so you get good power to that pump instead of the factory wire. I guarantee you won't have that kind of problem.
What's that 255 good for?
500, 550, easy.
Okay.
If you have enough power to it, you know. So when you don't have enough power to it, anywhere from 400 to 450, you start seeing really bad issues with it. So yes, you do that. So at this point, you know, gotten things a little moved along, a little bit more power for you, and you know, found the weak link already. Did it without hopefully annihilating anything.
I wouldn't have saw it just going through data logs at the track. I would have figured, oh, it's just my you know, meter transfer.
So let's kill fans. Okay, here I have, looking at the dyno PC, I got the last 2 runs pulled up, okay? It's graph versus time rather than RPM because one of the runs didn't, the car hit the rev limiter before it hit the dyno's stop speed, so the run got all wonky if we turn it back into the graph by RPM. Like even graphing by time, we can see something happening. Looking at the black line, the air-fuel ratio line, we see that it's kind of hangs, at the start of the run, it's hanging out, and, a little bit on, leaner air-fuel ratios at the lower loads, and as the turbo spools, you see it, drop down, and it's, pretty flat for a while. It's not making, not really going up, not really going down. It's doing pretty much what we've commanded it to do because we're commanding pretty even air-fuel ratio. And then at the lower of the 2 black lines, the previous run, you can see it goes out a little bit further, and then it starts on this kind of diagonal trajectory of getting leaner. And it's, more or less a straight line getting leaner from that point. Then in the run we just did, I was like, huh, that looks kind of odd. I, bumped a little into the math curve thinking that the problem was, something I'd configured. We ran it this time with a little bit more boost, and earlier on, it takes that same sort of upward trajectory. And that's after putting more into the math curve. What does this generally say? If you've told us that there's more air, and the computer's trying to open those fuel injectors a little bit more, but instead of going richer or maintaining a constant air-fuel ratio, you're going leaner, something else is at play. And in this case, I'm going to say fuel pressure and fuel delivery. And, we got a fuel pump that's running on factory wiring. It's making upper 400s now. Could be, but I'd say for every regulator problem I see 20 fuel pumps that can't keep up. Maybe, but no, I don't think so. I think it's much more likely to be the fuel pump, especially considering looking at the past 2 runs. The problem we had on 12 pounds got worse on whatever the 14 pounds or so that it was on that run.
Out of curiosity, which fuel pump do you have in it? It's a World War II.
Yeah. And okay, and this brings up another point, okay? You can have the biggest, baddest, most wonderful fuel pump in the whole world. If that fuel pump can't get enough energy to pump the fuel, it's not going to work properly. And the stock wiring, especially, it's a 1995 vehicle, if you're talking about 20-year-old wiring on this thing, it's had plenty of time to wirings break down and get cruddy. If you're gonna, my rule of thumb is asking for anything over 400 horsepower, your factory wiring's not gonna cut it. Even if you have a really nice pump, it's not gonna cut it. Put a relay and relay the pump, get a lot better shape. So decent wiring. So I don't know, at this point I'm prepared to call it quits on this car, and yeah. Enjoy your car. So, I'll email you tunes. So, any questions so far about what we were poking with this thing? Anything anyone wants a little clarification on before we call it quits? Okay.
I could hear on the railroad down to like 3 stars down 4 with